Welcome to the Sponsored Rider Club podcast, your guide to motorsports sponsorship. Here's your host, Josh Weesey.
Welcome to this episode of the Sponsored Rider Club podcast, which is powered by AMSOIL. Today we have stock car racer Will Rodgers on, and he is just a blast. We had a lot of fun. We talked about running out of money, which I think everybody can somewhat relate to. We talked about the advantages of a healthy economy and how that can link up with stock car racing. We talked about breaking things, fixing stuff till they're broken, which I tend to do that as well, and a whole bunch of other stuff. But before I get into the episode with Will, there's a few things I want to go over with you. One is the partnership that we have with AMSOIL. You know, we're working together to make sure that you have the tips, the tricks, the advice, the opportunity to improve your sponsorship program. That's what this whole thing's about. That's why the show exists. We think ultimately that if you have the information that you need to make better decisions about your sponsorship, then ultimately you're going to get better. Motorsports in general is going to grow. And hey, we like that. We love motorsports. We want it to continue for years and years and years and years and years. We want you to be happy in the process. We want you to have access to all this cool stuff, like being able to go to races without worrying about the money constantly. And we want you to be able to make a connection with a business or a sponsor without getting so stressed about it that you never actually make the contact. We want you to be able to network comfortably, all the above. And actually, one thing pretty cool that AMSOIL did is after we sat down with them at Heydays 2018 in Minnesota, Lindsay Primo, who was on the show, she put together a blog post that outlines a ton of opportunities for improving your sponsorship program. So she basically took 5 main things, broke them down point by point, and published that in a blog post. Now it's available at the AMSOIL site, also at sponsoredriderclubpodcast.com. So if you go to sponsoredriderclubpodcast.com and click on read, you will see 3 different articles, but one of them is tips and tricks from AMSOIL for landing a racing sponsorship. So if you're like me and you like to read things and take notes, go check that out. It's good advice. All right, I would also love to get your feedback, and the best way to do that is to head over to iTunes, leave a rating and review. I can't tell you how important it is for the exposure of the show to have the ratings and reviews captured on iTunes. It's a big driver for exposure. And what that means is that we can continue to exist. We can continue to attract and retain sponsors for ourselves, which means we can continue to bring on amazing guests and deliver content to you. So again, it's really big to leave the rating and review on iTunes. That's why I always talk about it. It's really important to me. All right, and subscribe. This is important for you so that you can continue to get access to the shows, the next guests, the future guests, without having to remember to download it all the time. It's a lot easier that way. And you don't want to miss our upcoming guests. We have Ross Robinson coming on and also Duncan Lee. All right, this episode here is also sponsored by SolderWeld. They produce game-changing metal bonding technology. There's TopThePodium.com. They're experts in motorsports sponsorship. Bold Racing, they're a family race team, and they provide amazing axles through GSP XDV axles. Armor Coat, they simplify your cleaning process. Crash Addict Industries, they provide human protection and extreme racing products. And then there's Racing Addix. They are providing a whole new spin on networking and motorsports sponsorship. I also want to shout out some of our other partners, including MBRP Powersports, MBRP Exhaust, HMK USA, Studboy Traction, GSP XTV Axles, and One Stop Performance. Without further ado, let's hit it. Today I have Will Rodgers on. Now, Will, I'm not going to waste any more time even trying to introduce you. I want you to take a minute, tell us about yourself.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it. I'll try to jump in and not bore you too much with the details, but essentially I'm 23 years old. I live in Huntersville, North Carolina, just north of Charlotte. I've kind of relocated here for my NASCAR career. I've been racing in stock cars for about almost 3 years now, and that's currently my career path. Before then, I've come from a lot of different racing backgrounds. I've got a lot of different experience in different kinds of cars and tracks and terrain, and it's kind of led me here, and it's me pursuing my dream. So that's hopefully the short and sweet answer for you.
No, that's perfect. And you're actually only the second stock car driver that's ever been on the show. And by the time this one releases, it's going to be around like episode 106 or 105, depending on when I release it. So there's been a lot of other people that are not stock car drivers that are on here, which means probably the audience isn't going to know as much about you or as much about stock car racing. So I might ask clarification questions as we go throughout this. The only other one that's been on the show, which at the time I think she was racing, I can't remember if she was in the NASCAR Wayland series or the ARCA series, but it was Amber Balkin. So yeah, I don't even know what episode that was. It was around like the 40s, I think. Yeah, and that was an awesome show, but that's really the only other stock car driver we've had on the show. And I mentioned it a little bit ago in the pre-interview, we've had one NHRA racer on twice, actually, Megan Meyer, who, if you haven't talked to her before, like, she's got to be one of the smartest people on the planet, and also a really good race car driver. But yeah, man, so I'll probably ask more questions than you're used to around just NASCAR and stock cars in general. But yeah, we'll start with that. I mean, in Heat 1, that's where we kind of dive into the background, and I've tried to use this first heat to help people build a relationship with the guest by knowing a little bit more about how they got into the sport and how they made some initial connections. So how did you get started?
It's kind of a long story, but it's a cool one, I think.
Let's do it.
Since I was born, yeah, we'll dive right in. Since I was born, my parents and my whole family knew it was always about something with a motor for me. So whether it was a plane, train, tractor, car, bus, you name it, I had to have some involvement with it, whether I was behind the wheel or just watching it. That was kind of what drove me as a young child. So knowing this, my parents, by the time I was in second grade, just happened to stumble upon the opportunity for me to go try a go-kart at our local racetrack. And how it worked was my mom was actually with me on a second grade some kind of trip we were doing up in the mountains or something. And another classmate's parent was there. They got to meet and they got to talk about how they go and race go-karts on the weekends. So mom said, heck, why not? We'll give it a shot. It's got a motor, so he's probably going to like it. A week later, went down to the local go-kart track, and a year later, we won our first championship in the IKF karting division. So it kind of snowballed there, and that's where it started. Shortly after we moved from Maui, where we were at the time, to the mainland in California, there was also some racing opportunity there for me, some work opportunities for my parents, and it was kind of time for us to move, so it worked out perfectly. And started racing karts in the Region 7 of IKF, which is probably the most well-known region of that series for the sheer talent that comes out of it or has come out of it over the years. So did that for a while and had some success. Never really won any races because we were coming from a small division into the biggest division, and it was kind of a steep hill to climb, but we still did pretty well. We unfortunately ended up running out of money trying to race go-karts competitively and kind of had to put that aside. But I still had the racing bug. And being that we lived in Southern California, the motocross mecca of the world, transition to motocross. We rode all the way from 65 cc's up to 250 cc's over 5 years, I believe, and had a lot of fun. Met a lot of great people, learned a new industry, and kind of learned how to race really aggressively and really learn how to read terrain. And by the time I was on 250s, I kind of realized that a lot of my friends around me who were trying to go pro and really trying to make a living out of that thing, they were getting hurt. A lot of them broke their backs and kind of really messed themselves up physically before the age of 20. So I kind of had to step back and realize, like, I'm not willing to do that. You know, I love motocross. I love being on the bike. I love the atmosphere, the people, but I also love being able to walk. Like,
Yeah.
you know, so it's like, as harsh as it sounds, like that's what I thought about. And ended up kind of walking away from motocross for some time. That was a point in time where I had to kind of go live on my own and grow up and learn how to be an adult. And it kind of led me back to realize I want to be a professional in motorsport. And it's definitely something I need to give a shot at because of my age, and just kind of opportunities that were on the table. And moved myself back home, ended up financing, with my parents' help, a Polaris RZR, and started racing that in some local series in Southern California. We ended up moving to the Lucas Oil Regional Series, where we did some short course racing, had some great success, got on a cool team that was pretty competitive, and that kind of developed like my further off-road skill, but still in a race car. So I was safe. From there, you know, from our experience there, we kind of learned the ins and outs of off-road, got to meet a lot of great people again, worked with a lot of great people, and then again kind of had this feeling of, all right, if I'm going to continue making this work, or at least giving it a shot, I had to go where the money was, or where I thought that the better opportunity was for somebody in my position and my resource. So my dad and I sat down one day, and we didn't really know where to go, but we knew that better opportunity was on the pavement. So we kind of transitioned to sports car racing. We took a little bit of a gamble on buying a Subaru STI right off the showroom floor and taking it to some SCCA or NASCAR days, and just just going to explore like some local tracks in Southern California. And we did that 4 or 5 times until Dad got a little excited, started, you know, buying bigger and better parts, started improving the suspension, and then came the motor. And before you knew it, we blew it up. And the thing, it kind of sat in our garage for 9 months because we tried to figure out how we were going to rebuild it. But through that experience, we met some really good people that raced what's called a Spec Miata, and it's actually the biggest and most popular form of sports car racing, I think, in the world. There's larger car counts in that class every weekend than anywhere. But what comes with that is the competitiveness and the understanding of really how to maximize your equipment, maximize the racing surface, and kind of get in the groove of these more high profile races, you could say. So I promise I'm getting to the end of my story here.
No,
I know it's
good,
a long,
man. This is perfect.
I know it's a long path, but so we did that for 2 or 3 years, won a championship, won a bunch of races, set track records, was actually nominated and put on a program called the Mazda, not the Mazda Road to Indy, but it's the Mazda Road to 24. And it's essentially where Mazda is trying to groom young drivers to potentially be their next headline sports car drivers. And we didn't end up getting a ride there, but we continued racing, and we soon after had the urge to try to go professional sports car racing. And I made my debut in the Pirelli World Challenge in a TCB Mazda 2 car, which is actually slower than a Spec Miata, believe it or not. Which it's a little front wheel drive, dinky little car, but they're spec'd out to race against each other. And it's actually really great racing, but on a pro level. Our first weekend, we swept the weekend, and we ended up winning 8 races out of 10 races, I believe, or 11 that season. So we didn't win the championship because I missed the last 3 races or so, due to me wanting to take the jump into stock car racing. We kind of had the time and experience to evaluate sports cars and understand the business a little bit, and then realized, you know, there's a healthier economy for sponsors in stock car racing. There's a higher competition level. I think, you know, we thought the sport as a whole was just a better opportunity for somebody like me. And we, in 2016, made our first jump into the NASCAR K&N Pro Series. And it kind of just snowballed as things do. And last year ran our full-time K&N West, where we finished 5th in points. And then we won 2 road course races last year. Actually, one of them was kind of my claim to fame, racing against legend Kevin Harvick, who has now become more or less a little bit of a mentor for me, but also an advocate for me. And then obviously this year we've raced in the K&N Pro Series and the ARCA Series. So after that long explanation, that's the extent of my experience and kind of how I got there.
That's it? Wow. I thought you'd have more. No, I'm just kidding.
Call me back in 2 years, man. It'll be twice as long.
You know, I knew that you raced other things in life. I didn't know you raced everything. Like motocross and razors and sports cars, and that's cool. I love hearing those examples of how people jump into different disciplines and still do good, and I think it's a great way to learn, multiple perspectives, multiple ways of running the racing program, which is a business.
Yep.
I think it's really cool. So we've only had a few guests on here that have hit as many as you have, and I just always think that it helps bring a good balance. And I just took a couple notes that I kind of wanted to follow up on. One thing you said earlier that probably everybody to an extent can relate to is you were like, I ran out of money racing go-karts. Like we literally just couldn't do it anymore. If people are listening right now, I guarantee there's at least there's probably at least 10 people that are like, yep, been there.
Yep.
That's probably why you're listening, actually. You're like, dang, I just can't get enough money to do what I need to do. Whether you're trying to get a $100,000 car or you're trying to get, $100 in gas. It's probably you're listening for the same reason.
No, I think almost everybody runs into that situation. And I probably downplayed my explanation there by saying we only ran out of money once. We ran out of money like 20 times,
right.
At least throughout the years. Like it was nonstop a struggle to just figure out how to go to the racetrack every weekend. And that it didn't matter if we were racing go-karts or stock cars. Like it's all relative when it comes to the money. And if you're in that kind of position where you kind of have to scratch and claw and figure out how to get those dollars, it just kind of becomes a normal thing,
Yeah, definitely. There's definitely been people on here that have talked about, maxing out their credit cards to be able to go to a race or to fix their vehicle. And, one of our guests talked about like they lost their house. They were essentially homeless and living off of a friend's couch, and they're like, but I still was able to race, and now they're doing great with a racing program and a business that. So it's Travis. People have heard this story before. Travis Pointer. He was featured on episode 43, and then also he was our first live guest. And he's been sponsoring the show, so now he's built a business, Crash Addict Industries, and he's been sponsoring this podcast.
Oh, great!
But it's cool seeing the end of the story too, right?
Yeah. I mean, you never know where it's going to take you. I mean, that's an incredible story to hear from him, and I'm hoping that I have a similar one. I mean, I've definitely spent the time living off a credit card to go racing, and like I mentioned, when I bought my Polaris UTV, I had to finance it with my parents' help. They had to co-sign for me. So,
exactly.
It's it's just part of the journey, man. And honestly, you could look at it as the grass is always greener and you want it a different way. But I think that these experiences, for me, growing a career, I'd rather do it this way because you got to work for it. And when you get it, it's just that much sweeter. You appreciate it that much more.
Yeah, definitely. You also said something that a lot of people can relate to, switch to a cage, left the motocross scene, got into something that had some sort of cage, additional amounts of safety. There's tons of people that continue to race ATVs and continue to race dirt bikes, but a lot of people who do make that switch, they switch for actually probably two reasons. One is the safety piece, but another one you also mentioned too is, there was a healthier economy. Like in your case, you saw it in stock car. I definitely, with the growth of the UTV scene and the introduction of the RS1, and I don't know, there's been a lot of money pouring into the UTV world, and I think that's also driven some other people to make that shift.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you got to be able to evaluate it in your own way and make your own decision. And our decision was to take it towards this more or less higher echelon of racing. But yeah, I mean, all of these industries within racing are growing. At least that's from my perspective. When I got into UTV racing, it wasn't half the size of what it is today, and it's only been a few short years since then. So. Yeah, I mean, wherever you find your niche or wherever you're coming from and your transition into, make your own determination, and hopefully it's the right one,
Yeah, definitely. And really the last thing I wanted to pull out of that story, it's one of my favorite quotes, and it came up for your Subaru story. If it ain't broke, fix it till it is.
Yeah. We, again, that was a great learning lesson for us. And I think Dad had a great time, and, we made the thing faster, we had more fun with it, but then you got to the point where, it wasn't liking the upgrades, and it wasn't actually the right car for us to be using anyway, and it blew up. But, in a sense, it was a blessing in disguise,
Definitely. So let's hear a little bit more about today. What are you up to right now? What are you really excited about?
Well, what I'm up to is really just developing my young stock car career. Again, like I said, I moved from Southern California over here to Charlotte, North Carolina, which is Race City, USA. It's where all the big teams are. A lot of the big sponsors and manufacturers have home bases here. So kind of made sure to be in the right spot. And then, of course, the other part is timing, but just doing the day-to-day, working with teams, working with my current sponsors, trying to figure out which race is next and how to capitalize on it most. That's kind of my day-to-day thing. And like I mentioned earlier, what I'm pretty fired up, I'd say, about is the industry as a whole, whether it's stock car racing or UTV racing or sports car racing. I think that in the last few years, again, this is just my perspective, but I think it's all been growing immensely, and in one way or another. But I think that's a really cool thing, and just to be a part of it, and then also watch it grow and garner more and more fans and more appreciation or attention, you could say. It's just something I really admire.
Yeah, and to give another example to the growth of the industry, I mean, this podcast has existed now it's coming up on 2 years in a couple more months here, and I don't think that it would have existed 3 years ago. I just don't think that. I mean, there was obviously the sponsorship game has been around for a long time, but things started blowing up with social media, and the UTV market started giving access to a lot more people that couldn't necessarily do motocross, couldn't necessarily do the ATV, couldn't necessarily do some of the stock cars. It's opened up a lot more opportunity out there, and then the social media piece has opened up things like the Weekend Warrior. I mean, like myself, I don't race, but the Weekend Warrior now has an opportunity to get sponsored with a strong social media following.
Yep.
I mean, the backcountry snowmobiling world has definitely exploded over the past couple of years. One, the machines have gotten much more capable, and the cameras and videography equipment has gotten much more capable to capture just amazing sights. But now you can share everything with social media, and I swear within the past couple of years it just continues to blow up. So the fact that even this show can exist and like endure for as long as it has is, I think, a testament to the growth of the industry.
Yeah, I'm with you entirely there. That's you took the words right out of my mouth. That's exactly
perfect.
Exactly what I see for sure.
We actually, people don't notice, but Will and I practiced this entire interview and scripted it all out first, so that was all part of the plan.
Oh yeah, don't tell him, man. Come on, don't tell him.
I do want to ask you now, who are some of your sponsors that you're working with?
Yeah, so I've got a few. Obviously, like everybody who's probably listening to this podcast, they're trying to, broaden their collective of sponsors. But the ones that I have who support me most right now are Dryden Oil. They're a company based in Jonestown, Pennsylvania, who's actually back on the rise as a brand. They originated over 100 years ago in the Mid-Atlantic Northeast region, and were very, very successful for years. And they were acquired by Castrol, who essentially phased them out because they were a big competitor. But now they've been reacquired by a company called TPC Lubricants, and they're kind of revamping the brand and making me more or less the face of it. So they're a huge supporter of mine. Kelly Benefit Strategies is another huge supporter of mine, based in Baltimore, Maryland. They're a company service provider, so they provide insurance and payroll and employee benefits for your company of small to medium size. Hercules Tire probably describes itself. They're an off-road or a consumer tire brand. Mm-hmm. And then Solvang Brewing Company, which is a local brewery in the Santa Barbara County area. And that's the list of my sponsors.
Yeah, one of the things that I love about stock car racing is the opportunity for non-endemic sponsors, which is sponsors outside the industry, to come in very strongly. The people watching, say, some type of stock car or NASCAR race, there's a lot more consumers there that aren't necessarily other racers, and it gives you it's a good marketing platform for companies that aren't necessarily just in motorsports. So Dryden, right, they're producing oil for cars and other vehicles. So that could be considered part of the industry. But like Kelly Benefit Strategies, that is purely targeted outside of the motorsports world, and I think that's pretty cool. Same with the brewing company. And I keep encouraging people to do this as much as possible. Surprise us. Go out there and find somebody that's a non-endemic sponsor and bring them into the world. Have them. Maybe it is another brewing company, or who, I don't know. Maybe it's I've heard some people with local concrete companies cover them. Reach out, surprise us.
That's a huge belief that I have when it comes to sponsorship acquisition or just having a sponsor. It doesn't matter if they make toothpicks or pillowcases or suitcases or lamps, just looking around my room right now, for example. But
I was right with you. I was doing the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. So that's something that I truly believe in. I don't think that you need to solely rely on the industry, people that produce your engine oil or your chains or your tires or what have you. Look elsewhere, and they're probably going to at least take a look at and consider your program if you have a legitimate reason or a legitimate return on investment to provide them. If you can prove to them that you're going to sell more pillowcases because their logo is on your car and you're going to do these 3 things for them, I don't think they really care, or they shouldn't care what you do. Mm-hmm. It just becomes this is what I'm doing for you, and then this is the platform that I'm going to do it on. Right. And really, unless they're avid motorsports fans, from a marketing perspective, they should just look at that as, okay, this is the return on investment. I could give a crap less what you do, kind of thing. Yeah. And I think that that's really been embraced in the NASCAR world for a long time. You look at Tide as a huge partner. You look at Lowe's. You look at some of the others that are like tech companies and stuff. They have nothing to do with racing. Mm-hmm. No involvement whatsoever. But they have found a reason to market their brand in that space, and they found the benefit. So I'm a huge believer in that for sure.
Yeah, completely. And one of the things that can come up as an opportunity from working with the non-endemic sponsors, kind of like what you said, they might not know even how to connect with your audience. So they might be a little bit less prescriptive about what you need to do, and they might say, just just do something. Like, I don't know, you know the world better than we do, which I think gives you a little bit of freedom, a little bit of flexibility, a little bit of opportunity to try new things that would definitely surprise them. And if you sell more pillowcases, then high fives all around.
Yeah, right on you. Exactly. That's a great scenario to have if they're open to your suggestion or at least your guidance. As long as you feel confident in it, it'll then be up to you to take it from there and hopefully make it work.
Yeah, definitely. And then I did want to call out a couple of things just about your sponsors there. So Dryden, for example, looking at their social media and some of the ways that you interact with them, I mean, they are all on board. Like they're like they've got your back. It's pretty cool to see the good relationship there. And also one of the things that is a very small but I think accurate indicator of a good relationship between a sponsor and a driver is you knowing about their company. So you just gave me and the listeners a good understanding of how they started, what has changed over the course of their career, and where they're at now and what they're trying to accomplish. And not everybody knows that about their sponsors. Not that it's bad, but I think it adds a little bit more value when you have that context and you can bring people into like the emotional challenges. Like for them, I'm thinking, gosh, yeah, wow, they started all this time, they got bought out, they kind of got phased out, and then they came back. It's like, that's a heroic story, right? That's kind of cool.
Yep.
But you had to tell it. I wouldn't have known it if you didn't tell it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that is a product of me spending a lot of different time in a lot of different areas of motorsport, kind of understanding the sponsor space and then how athletes or the representatives of these companies are interacting and what's good and what doesn't work. So I think that really is stuff that I've kind of self-taught myself just by, from the outside looking in, seeing, coming to a determination of, maybe I should do that, maybe I shouldn't do that. And one of those things that I should have done or am doing, and I realize that I should do, is really embrace myself as much as possible with that backing company. So I can't claim to know everything about Dryden. That's a for certain thing, but I'd like to think that I'm fairly educated so that when people come up and ask me, or if I'm put on the spot, I'm going to have the answer on, like you said, who they are, what they do, where they've come from. So, and what they believe in. So I think that from an athlete's perspective is a crucial thing, especially in this day and age.
Yeah. And one thing I'll share with people, and this is a decision that, everybody's going to have to make individually, is how many sponsors they do want to target. There are very, very successful people out there who have 30 plus sponsors in their program. Every little part is covered by somebody. And, I'm thinking of Kristen Matlock. She's a UTV racer, just won the overall in Baja. And then Walker Fowler, he's got 30. Both of them have 30 plus sponsors. And then I've had people on the show like Tony Jenkins. He's a backcountry snowmobiler. He's sponsored by Skidoo primarily, but he has a few, 3 to 5. And like in your case, similar story. And there's a trade-off, right? You can, if you have 3 to 5 sponsors, you can get to know them better. You can focus a lot more of your resources on them. Now, you're also going to have to expect more from them in return in order to cover your entire program. Whereas if you do have, 30 plus sponsors, you can spread that challenge, that financial challenge, that financial burden amongst all 30. But it's just a decision you have to make on, how you're going to run your program.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately for me, I'll admit I've got ADD, that's for sure. So I can't spend a lot of time focusing on one thing, but I could also get overwhelmed by focusing on too many things at once. So for me, the 3 to 5 number is perfect. If I had 30 sponsors, I wouldn't know what to do. Right. I'd wake up in a panic every day, I think, and say, oh my gosh, 15 of these guys are being left out to dry and I need to do something right now, kind of thing. Yeah, I mean, it's all personal preference, and obviously comes down to what opportunities you have, and what you think the return is for them. Like you said, if you've got 30, you don't have to lean on each one individually as much, so you don't have to worry, at least from what I would think is too much on the return specifically. But then what happens when you lose, 2 or 3 of them in one season and you can't get them back? Now you got 27.
Mm-hmm.
Does your whole program fall apart, kind of thing? So for me, the 3 to 5, like I said, is perfect. And finding those that are really enthusiastic about it too, like with Dryden primarily, I got really lucky with them because they are such an enthusiastic bunch, that the leadership there, you can't ask for better people. And on top of that, what's so amazing is not only the leadership, but the entire company is enthusiastic about motorsports. Obviously, the leadership there really drives home, like, okay, we're doing this and we're going to be excited about it, and this is why. But everybody, like, I've gone to some events where I've been fulfilling a PSA with the company, and everybody has on the T-shirt. Everybody's been following the races. I get questions from almost every employee saying or asking me, the basics, but then also communicating to me, we've been following and we're the biggest fans and I can't wait for the next race. I think that's super important. So when you have that 3 to 5, those 3 to 5 sponsors, finding the ones that are really going to become, really embraced with you, I think is important.
Definitely. And a sponsor that is willing to have you come in to their operation and be kind of a part of the group, I think that's pretty beneficial. For example, on a little bit smaller scale, Bold Racing has been sponsoring this show for a long time now. And Jimmy Moore, he's the owner of Bold Racing. He also has his own race team. I mean, last year I was 8 months into the show. He's like, why don't you come on out, hang out with my family, and go race with me? You can be part of my pit crew. You don't have to know exactly what you're doing. We'll show you what to do. And let's go do Vegas to Reno, biggest off-road race in the U.S. And I'm like, okay, sure. And
cool.
And it was a blast. But like, I'm fortunate to have connected with him because he gave me that opportunity. Hopefully, I was able to drive some more visibility and exposure his way as well. But then he invited me back again, and it's like, now it's kind of a thing, it's pretty cool. And I see that like with you and your interactions with Dryden, and there's other people where I'm trying to think, I can't remember the company now, which is probably bad, but Joey D, I think, has gone in on a couple of like wheel manufacturers. And you've done like these behind the scenes, like, look at this, man, they're designing a wheel right now. You're like, this is awesome.
Yeah, no, those are super important things to do, I think, as long as, that is what your brand is and what you're trying to portray and the kind of relationship you want to have with your partners. But yeah, Joey is a great example. He's always been a guy that's got a ton of hands-on time or experience, and he's got a very unique way of sharing it with people. Obviously the social world loves that, but then I'm assuming not only through the social, results, but then the partners themselves, they really see a ton of value in that, and they get to see somebody, or they get to invite somebody in who's passionate about it and is just thrilled to be there and be a part of it. That's definitely something that Joey does, and I've experienced firsthand with him actually, which is really neat. And I think through Joey, I've actually been able to learn how to do that myself. And now that I'm doing that with Dryden, it's super beneficial. So
definitely. And today is August 29th of 2018. That's when we are recording. Joey D just announced that he is leaving UTV Underground. He's the CEO, co-founder right now, and he's leaving to go work as a director of something at Four Wheel Parts, which is part of basically the main company that it's part of the Polaris empire, I guess.
Yeah, the Trans-American Auto Parts.
Trans-American
Group,
Auto
I
Parts.
believe it is.
That's it.
Is what it is. Yep.
That's it, man.
Yeah, that's huge for Joey. I actually got to comment with him on Facebook the other day, and he wrote me back, and it was really neat to hear from him, but really cool to see that, he spent 10 years developing UTV Underground, and it went from this just little forum website up into what it is now, and what he and the Martelli bros have been able to do to develop that thing. It's mind blowing, to see where it's gone. And then obviously for Joey to have the opportunity to go work alongside those people is pretty neat. I think he'll be a great fit there. He's definitely a guy that I need to stay in contact with, because like my career, his career is still on the rise. So the more people, you get to know in your inner circles and stuff, the better off you are for both careers,
Definitely. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that Craig Scanlon might have had something to do with that, but who knows?
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, it's cool though. If people do want to hear a little bit more about Joey D, he was on episode 24 of this show, which is actually quite a while ago now. But he gives his story there, and then he just wrote his last going away article on the UTV Underground blog. It's pretty cool, all the things that he's done over the past 10 years. So either way, if you're interested, I encourage checking one of those resources out. Wow, we have been just cruising. We're not even into Heat 2 yet. That was just Heat 1.
I'm good, man. I'm like,
you're good?
I'm in high drive right now. Just
all right. Well, we're going to keep rolling then. But we are going to take a quick break right now to thank the sponsors for this podcast. Safety is our overriding priority. I hear it all the time, but I have to ask myself, is it though? Is that the first thing we think of? Is that the first thing you think of? Over the past couple of years, we've seen the performance of production UTVs increase, somewhere around 350%. That means these machines give us a lot more opportunity to have fun and win races, but it also, unfortunately, gives us new opportunities to crash. And that's why we have partnered with Crash Addict Industries. The owner, Travis Pointer, became very accustomed to crashing early in his career. He saw it as inevitable, and he set out to make the process safer. With a passion for racing, welding, and engineering, Crash Addict Industries now produces full cage and other protection systems intentionally designed to protect you during an accident on the track. They also offer a line of human protection products through their vendors. Do this for me at this point. If you're racing with a stock cage right now, please go check out crashaddict.com and at least see what they have to offer. Even if you choose to go with a different company, please make safety your overriding priority. I am constantly asking the guests of this podcast how they attract and retain sponsors. And on almost every single occasion, somebody gives an example of a resume. A rider or a racer resume is extremely important to your overall sponsorship pitch and proposal. And it's tough to do. It's not really the easiest thing. Anybody can go through and put together a resume, so don't get me wrong there, but it's really difficult to get something that's unique and different and stands out, and that also is something that can be put across multiple platforms. Well, that's one of the things that I want to talk to you about next, is how topthepodium.com can actually help you build a race or rider resume that can be used on multiple platforms. I'm talking website, PDF, something you can print off, that's interactive, that looks fantastic. It looks absolutely professional. Well, that's because it's made by a professional. This is the type of thing that's going to set you apart from the crowd, and that's going to position you for a strong sponsorship proposal. So what I want you to do next is go to topthepodium.com, and if you have a question, there's a little chat icon that pops up on the side of the screen when you go to topthepodium.com, and you can go ahead and type your question right there. Jeff Vanestal, he is the owner of Top the Podium. He's going to be able to respond to you directly. So check it out.
What's up, everyone? George Hamill here. As a professional off-road racer, I'm always seeking a competitive advantage. My vehicle, tools, and products must perform flawlessly for me to excel on the racetrack. I only use products that help me succeed and provide me an edge over my competition. One critical area that affects racing is weight, and this is certainly true for UTV racing. Mud, dirt, and grease can accumulate under the vehicle and on the tires, decreasing speed and performance. So in 2017, we partnered up with Never Lift Racing and their amazing product Armor Coat. This spray-on product performs. Not only does it reduce the effect of mud while racing, but it also makes cleanup quicker and gives my vehicle a professional appearance on race day. Armor Coat Spray is a critical part of our race program. Grab some today. You'll be amazed.
Whether you are a professional racer like George or a weekend warrior like myself, Armor Coat can make a huge difference in your life. Armor Coat from Neverlift Racing is a unique solution formulated to help prevent mud, clay, and ice from sticking to the surfaces that you treat. This cuts your cleanup time in half while keeping your machine looking new. So I want you to go check out armorcoatproducts.com for the latest off-road care products.
What's up, everyone? This is Mike Pasquarella, founder of Desert Vets Racing. When the team goes racing, we always have our SolderWeld products with us. Keeping the cars in the fight is our number one concern. With SolderWeld, we can do that. SolderWeld is a leading company in the U.S. for aluminum repair. They specialize in radiator repair on the fly. If you're stuck in the middle of the trail or a race with a hole in your radiator, oil pan, or canister, or even an aluminum line, you can fix it right then and there in a matter of minutes with their AMSOIL aluminum repair rods and flux. It's the only complete and lasting fix in the off-road community. SolderWeld's new UTV off-road kits fit in every ride and are easy to access on the fly.
SolderWeld continues to make a huge positive impact on this industry. So I really encourage you, get in there now. Go to solderweld.us, check out their products, because this stuff is changing the game. Are you ready for an entirely new approach to motorsports sponsorship and networking? I'm assuming the answer is yes, because why else would you be listening to this podcast? We are excited to be teaming up with Racing Addix. They are legitimately questioning and challenging the status quo on sponsorship. Once you become part of their network, they will first off sponsor you directly, but then also help link you with other companies who are dedicated to making motorsports better and providing you with additional sponsorship opportunities. This is crazy stuff. If you're excited about this, then join the club. Your next step is to head over to the social media and find Racing Addix, give them a follow, and stay tuned for what's next. I hear it constantly from racers that a good suspension setup is absolutely critical for performance, and that's why I'm going to talk to you next about bold racing and suspension. Now, it's really critical to understand your suspension, and there's so many intricacies with the valving and the shims and all this crazy equipment that you need to actually, rebuild and properly set up your suspension, that it's really important, if you're ready for that next level of performance, to partner with an awesome suspension company. Now, Bold Racing is that company. They're not only specialists with their suspension setups, but they also partner with companies that produce amazing custom components. And on top of that, they're a family race team. They actually race themselves, so they really understand the type of beating that your vehicle and your shocks can take. So what I want you to do is give them a call and just chat with them. Talk to them about suspension. Their number is 702-506-5354. If you're not ready for a phone call, go ahead and shoot them an email, bold.racing@yahoo.com. All right, welcome back, everybody. We are finished now with Heat 1. We're in Heat 2 now. That's where we're going to get into the kind of the nitty-gritty details around sponsorship. We already kind of talked about a number of things that I normally would try to bring up in Heat 2, which I'm excited about. But I do want to dive into a couple of topics here. First off, one that I always talk about is the relationship-building aspect of a sponsor. How you connected with them, how you built that relationship. Let's kind of go there. Do you have one or two examples that you can walk us through?
Yeah, I can give you my two biggest sponsors right now. Like I said, Dryden Oil and then Kelly Benefit Strategies. Mm-hmm. I think that they're both unique in the way that I was able to connect with them, and maybe it'll help with some listeners. But starting with Dryden, essentially last year, like everybody is all the time, I was on the sponsorship hunt. And as bad as it sounds, cold calling and doing the day-to-day knocking on doors kind of thing to figure out, okay, what's my path? Who has interest in doing this? How could I provide them value kind of thing? And through a great connection of mine in actually Baltimore City, Maryland, he just happened to work with or know the people at PPC Lubricants, and walked in the door one day and saw that they were acquiring the Dryden brand and bringing it back. He had the access to talk to one of the presidents at the company, I believe, and kind of just said, hey, I'm working with this young race car driver. He lives in California. This is what he's doing. This is how well he's done this year, and it would be great to make an introduction. So lo and behold, a few months later, we got to sit down, actually very late in the year last year. I believe it might have been December, and we struck a deal. They wanted to sign up for 2018 to do, starting out with 4 ARCA races, which ended up growing to a total of 8 ARCA races, and also being a part of 3 K&N races, which we won 2 of them, which was awesome. And they've also signed a PSA deal with me this year. That's awesome. So that was kind of the way that I got introduced to Dryden, and it was just, as everybody can say, part of it has to do with luck and the right timing. I think the lucky part was that my connection there just happened to walk through the door that day, and the timing of them just reintroducing the Dryden brand to the market. But also really pounding the pavement and working with your connections to drum up that tiny lead that doesn't look like much, and then it blossoms into this whole new thing. So that was my Dryden experience. But when it comes to my Kelly Benefit Strategies relationship, that's actually a relationship that started 50 plus years ago, way before I was born, probably before my parents were born. My grandfather actually gave Frank Kelly Sr. his first job in the insurance business. And Frank Kelly went on to establish Kelly Benefit Strategies as his company, and it has now grown into a very large entity. They have over 500 employees, several locations, and they have, I believe it's upward of 12,000 clients. And so they're a very, very successful business where they are. But when I started racing professionally, I was granted the opportunity to introduce myself to Frank Kelly and kind of tell him about what I was doing. And because of that past family relationship, I had kind of an open door and an ear for somebody to actually take a listen to what I was doing. It was not easy because Frank and the company, they didn't understand what I was doing. They had no involvement in motorsports or interest. But over time, as I developed more and more results, I kept just giving them updates, making sure they were listening to me, making sure they were looking at the right things, and kind of educating piece by piece. And it's, again, kind of come and blossomed into this whole new relationship where they understand how their business utilizes my business and what the return is. And then they're also, on the other side, emotionally attached because of our great relationship throughout our family. So that's more of a family connection kind of thing. But that's not to say I didn't have to work for it, because it's taken a lot of time to really nurture it and prove to them this is going to work for you. And so far, I think it's worked well.
You know what is fascinating to me? I love going into these details around the connections and like imagining the first moment. So in this case, we're going back a long time. Like your grandfather with, someone giving them an opportunity, a small opportunity. That probably started with, running into him somewhere in the street or a letter, or like that moment now led to this many years later, you having a sponsorship package with them for a professional race program. Like, wow, talk about just insanity. So I think that's
who would have thought?
Who would have thought? Like, you can't imagine something like that. And I love thinking about that right now. Like, let's say somebody just heard that comment. while they're listening to the show, and they change something in their sponsorship program, and then their grandchild 50 years later somehow benefits from it. Woo. Man,
I know.
It'll get you.
It's crazy.
It's crazy.
And actually that brings up another thing, going back to the Dryden part. They've got such a heritage behind them. Before they changed hands to Castrol when they were acquired, Dryden was huge into racing. Lindsey Dryden, who owned the company, he loved motorsports. He loved putting his logos on fast cars and airplanes and all kinds of different things. And they actually sponsored a NASCAR driver, one of the first female NASCAR drivers, Shauna Robinson is her name. And they were a sponsor for her before they were acquired. And it's kind of funny, even though the company's changed hands years and years later, the heritage still lives on, and they're still in motorsport, which is really cool. So just to lend back to your story, you never know where it's going to go in 50 years, kind of thing.
Well, and even the fact that we're talking right now, I mean, we talked about this in the pre-interview. Rusty Baptist, who has sent a number of guests this way, he's like this secret behind-the-scenes promoter of people, and he's
legend. All the way, legend.
And I like to give him shout-outs on the show when it works out where I can get one of his recommendations on here, because I like those secret behind-the-scenes promoters. You got to have those people in your life. I actually did an episode with Lauren Morell of Mad Dog Media Marketing just on that, just on like the benefits of helping people behind the scenes. Lauren Morell is someone who does that as well. And it's just and it actually goes into another point that I wanted to kind of pull out from your story, where you were saying there's someone who is intrigued by you or caught you impressed them, and they were the ones that made the connection with not Dryden but the parent company initially, and you're like, yeah, I had a supporter and they kind of went to bat for me. So part of that is that you don't necessarily have to impress everyone. Ideally, yeah, if you do that, great. We're high-fiving if everybody's impressed by you. But sometimes it's just one or two people that you have to impress, and they will help make the connections from there.
Exactly. You could look at it almost like a 6 degrees of separation kind of mentality. Maybe you impress 6 people, and those 6 people might just connect to literally everybody. Mm-hmm. So as long as you can do that, and you can kind of have a few people that rally behind you, you never know where it goes. And Rusty's definitely one of those guys. Since day one when I met him when I was racing UTVs and working for Mad Media, he's always been a huge supporter of mine. A lot of those guys that I've met, and obviously it's helped me connect with you and be on the show, but I think it's also helped me connect with a lot of different people and develop these unique relationships. And then, my now business partner, you could say, in Baltimore, who connected with Dryden, he was a firm believer. He knew what my program was about. He knew that it was going to be beneficial for the company, and all it really took was him voicing his opinion. And again, lo and behold, it happened. So, you never know. You gotta definitely inspire a lot of people. You don't have to go inspire everybody, but hopefully those people that you do will help you do it, or help pay off a little bit.
Definitely. And then you talked about being lucky to be with Dryden. I like the word luck. I used to actually not like it. But I've learned a little bit more about it. People, if you've listened to a couple of shows, you've probably noticed that I nerd out sometimes on like psychological things, and I read books on human psychology and all this garbage. But one of the books that I read recently was talking about luck, and it was actually around like who ends up being a really strong leader, and whether it's a human, a person in a company leading it, or the company being a leader in the market. But a lot of the interviews with these really successful CEOs, they'll say, yeah, I was just a very lucky person. But what that's showcasing is there's some humbleness there. Like they're not, you're willing to follow somebody who has a humble background or a humble view of themselves, but yet still is very successful. And that's the word luck sometimes comes in that way. The other thing that I like to say too is luck is when hard work meets opportunity, because in every one of those cases with the CEO, there was, they say they're lucky, but actually they had these really strong strategies and years of hard work, and they just took advantage of it at the right timing. And it's hard to do that sometimes. Well, all the time. All the time it's hard to do that.
Yeah, exactly. No, I believe solely on your second point there. There's luck can only take you so far. I think when it comes to the drying thing, we had great timing, and that was a luck thing, and we were just lucky to be introduced to the brand that's reemerging, and we were lucky to fit that brand's model. But if I wasn't where I was in December of last year, as far as my career development goes and my business development, we would not have landed the deal. I can tell you that. Mm-hmm. So there was a lot of work that had to be done, and there's been so much development in my career thus far. Without it, I know we wouldn't have been so successful. So I think to your point, luck's definitely part of it, but you got to be able to back it up too.
Yeah, and there's some factors that I know, like for my example, I consider myself a pretty doggone lucky person. I mean, I was born in what I believe to be a pretty amazing country, and mm-hmm. I was born to a family that was very healthy, still is very healthy, and my dad did lawn care when he was young, so I had access to a job from a very young age, and which meant I've always had access to create my own resources to enjoy my hobbies. Like, some people will never get those opportunities. But my dad didn't force me to work. It wasn't like he said, he's like, I can give you a job. Do you want a job? Yeah, great. And I did it. And I could have done plenty of other things, good or bad. But either way, so there's a ton of luck that played into that, because I could have been born, during, I don't know, some sort of tragic world event, in which case I was, and I could have been a part of it. I don't know. There's just so many other negative things that could have happened, and it didn't. So I gotta say, luck is a major portion of it, but hard work comes into play as well.
Definitely, I agree, and I definitely think about the same thing a lot, and I'm very fortunate to be where I am and had the opportunities that I've had, and been surrounded by the people I have been. Definitely trying not to take that luck for granted too much,
Mm-hmm. Last thing too that I just wanted to pull out, man, we've been you say a couple of things, you get me all excited over here. I can talk for a while, but
good deal. That's the salesman in me, man.
You got
that's it. Like, I'm dedicated. I'm down to do this thing. You
got it. But yeah, I just wanted to kind of pull out about here and talk about networking. Networking is hard. If anybody tells you it's not, they're either amazingly good or amazingly humble. Because it takes a lot of effort. I mean, I have this little podcast, and I feel like that's all I do is network. I mean, it's even the little things. Someone will send you a message, and you're like, wow, this person, I feel like I need to stay in contact with them. And then they'll send you a message every other week. And you're like, okay, that's great. Yep. And then that happens for 150 other people. And all of a sudden you're like, holy cow, this is 2 hours.
Where'd the time go?
Yeah, where'd the time go?
Yeah. Well, it's funny, as you're saying this, I'm literally scrolling through LinkedIn right now.
Yeah.
So no, networking is huge, and it's definitely, I'm not going to say it's easy by any means. It's never been easy, but I've been fortunate to be connected with a good amount of people who are very influential and connected themselves. So I've kind of been able to lean on some individuals to kind of help broaden my Rolodex, I guess. But it's definitely something that I do all day, every day as well. Because you never know where that one guy you meet how that one guy you meet is gonna change your career, or you change their career, or something like that. It's so crucial, I think, especially for the sponsorship business. You need to keep meeting more and more people, because that's just, the more people you meet, the more potential opportunities show up. So the more you can do is definitely definitely better, you know.
Yeah, and another hard thing about networking, and honestly the reason why we're harping so much on networking right now in this interview is it is critical to a sponsorship program because you get the introductions to people, you make good relationships. Those people, even a relationship you have now with somebody that you think means nothing, it could in 5-10 years mean something much bigger. So that's why we're talking about it so much. It is very important for the program. But I'll tell you something I've learned recently. I've again been very fortunate in my career. I've had been part of a great company for about 9 years, and I recently made a change, which was scary and hard and all that fun stuff. But I made a change to a different company, and I didn't realize how invested I was with people at my old company. And I was like, I've been reflecting on that a little bit recently, and I'm like, there's 10 to 15 people that I want to stay connected with. Like, I want to see them succeed. I've been involved since leaving my old company. I feel like I've still had an impact, and I actually tallied up 5 different promotions for people after I left the company. And I'm like, why do I even, one, why am I tracking it? 2, why am I helping? But, I mean, ultimately, I just get really excited about that stuff. But there's some people that I want to keep in my network. You know, I want to work for them one day, or I want them to be part of my team again one day, or I want to be part of their team again one day. And you just kind of keep an eye on those folks. Just like you said with Joey D, right? I want to stay connected with him.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, the best way I guess I could say is never take those relationships for granted, no matter what they look like at the time or what they are. You know, Joey's probably a perfect example. I mean, I met Joey, it might be like 7 years ago now, and that was when I was just trying to get my start, not only in off-road racing, but also get my start in the production world, working for Mad Media. And I got to work with him on a ton of different projects and get to know him and get to know his family and have a really great time. But the last few years since I've kind of traveled away, it has diminished a little bit. But I'm hoping now that, you know, relationships like he and I and many others will just continue to at least be not on the back burner, but just still develop over time, you know, little by little, because you're right. You never know where it's going to go.
Definitely. Well, I normally go through a bunch of questions in this heat, but I'm going to, in the interest of time, I'm going to hone in on just a few here. I do want to ask you, because it seems like you've done a number of unique things with Dryden specifically, but, you know, what is something unique that you have done to, you know, promote your sponsors or gain additional exposure for sponsors?
I'd have to think long and hard about something unique that I've done when it comes to just me and what we do for sponsors. But I'd say on a unique side of things, I try to do as many creative little playful videos that they can utilize, whether it's on their mainstream social channels or within their company internally. I think I've got a few good people that I work with behind the scenes on producing those things. So I think that's been more or less a unique thing that I provide them that they really value. The other part of it is just being engaged as much as I can. And that is, you know, going to do these visits with the company and just having a really good time, as opposed to just going and spending the amount of hours that you need to and then leaving and not really talking to anybody. I try to really embrace the opportunity and the experience so that, you know, they again see somebody that's very vested in or is very passionate or enthusiastic about the partnership they have. So without going too detailed, I think that's probably the best example I got for you.
No, that's good. And I just thought of something as you were giving that example, something I saw that you were a part of. It wasn't specifically for a sponsor, but it was a fun thing, and it was like up and coming stock car racers, and it was this funny little video skit. There was a number of drivers on it. I feel like I saw it on Twitter where, gosh, what was it like? I was hoping that you would just like hop in and say, "Oh yeah, it's that," and fill in the details.
I have no idea.
You probably do so many.
I have
of these
no
things.
idea what you're talking about.
Goodness gracious.
Was it recently?
It was probably within the last like 3 months, I would say.
Okay. I'm really trying to think. maybe it was part of the NASCAR Next program.
Yes, NASCAR
something
Next.
Like that.
We're getting
was
there. It was NASCAR Next.
Okay. NASCAR Next. I'm trying to think. We've done like 10 videos together, so I'm not sure which ones, and they're always usually pretty funny. But
yeah.
I'll
either
have
way,
to keep thinking about it and get back to you.
Either way, I guess the concept that I want to convey, because I can't even remember all the details about it. That's a lot of times people don't actually remember details of things. They remember how it made them feel. So I remember that it made me feel like this is cool, this is fun. This is the future of NASCAR, and it was just a number of up and coming drivers that were like having a good time, and it was a good little video skit. So I guess what I would encourage people to do, if you have access to opportunities like that, take them. Even if it might sound a little goofy at first, I don't know, it could be a success, it could be a hit. Plus, anything where you can link up with other people who are trying to grow their brand at the same time you're trying to grow your brand, you could team up. In that one, like, there was a number of other drivers. I'm sure everybody shared it on their own social media platforms and in their own networks. So then that gives you more exposure, and then consequently your sponsor more exposure as well. So definitely keep an eye out for those types of opportunities and take advantage of them.
Yeah, definitely. Anything you can do, it always helps.
Well, I'm going to do a very short main event here, and we've talked a lot about mindset anyways. I like to have the main event here to set aside to talk about mindset. I think it's critical. A lot of times in intros I'll say, it's important for people to take massive action, but also have the right mindset. So that's why we talk about it. I like this question because it puts people in the perspective, or it puts them in the shoes of being a sponsor themselves. If you could sponsor any athlete or driver, racer in the world, who would you choose to sponsor, and why would you pick them?
Oh, man. Somebody specifically? Like, I have to come up with a name right now?
Yes. No pressure, but don't mess this up.
Oh my gosh, this is too much for me, man.
That's why I love the question.
Of course, I'm going to say Will Rodgers. That's
right.
That's who got a sponsor right there.
That's it.
No, I think on a more serious note, probably somebody. I can give you the characteristics. I can't think of the one person right now, because when it comes to like NASCAR racing, everybody is so different. One side of me wants to lean towards a Jimmy Johnson, but then another side of me wants to lean towards a Kevin Harvick or somebody like Kyle Busch. There are so many different personalities that I think that I would want to get behind, but not all of them as a whole, I guess. But I'd say somebody that's really driven. They got a good head on their shoulders. They really know how to represent. Obviously, they've got to be able to get the job done on the racetrack, but just be personable. Be a real person, as opposed to a robot or a total jerk, or somebody that's just completely out to lunch. Be engaged. So, as I don't know who I could put a name on right now, honestly, that's kind of my answer. I'll think about it, though. I might come back to you on that one.
Well, you actually accomplished the mission that I had set out to achieve
good.
Here.
Perfect.
And that's the struggle that you just went through. Guess what, people? Sponsors go through the same struggle. They're like, who should I sponsor? Well, I could sponsor anybody in the world. Or I don't even have to sponsor anybody. I could go make a commercial about my product. They got all these options. And guess what? When we say, like, these big companies doing it, and a lot of times there's only one or two people. Even if it is a smaller company, let's say it's a 50-person company, there's probably still only a couple people that are involved in that decision. So there's a lot to think about there. And it is stressful, and it is hard. Like, I think the way you did it is probably the way a lot of companies might do it too, is they set out a set of characteristics, and they go out to try to find people who meet those characteristics. But you know who I thought you were going to say? I thought you were going to say Ryan Eversley. Or Eversley? I'm not sure if I pronounced it correctly.
Yeah.
The reason I said, because we talked about him in the pre-interview a little bit, I just didn't know if you're going to bring him up or not.
Yeah. No, Ryan's a really good example. whether or not all of those characteristics are perfect to who he is, but he's an engaging guy. He's a smart guy. He cares. He gets it done on the racetrack, like I said. And, he has at least 3 or 4 of those characteristics that I mentioned. So he's a pretty good one for sure.
Definitely. Well, we're going to kind of wrap things up now at the finish line. Out of everything that we've talked about today, is there one thing that you just want to reiterate for people to take away from this show?
I think it's actually something that I didn't get to really harp on too much, and that is really when you've secured a sponsor, however hard it is or however long it takes, when you get that partner, don't take them for granted. Take the extra 5 minutes, hour, 3 hours a day it takes for you to figure out, how am I going to benefit them by being a part of my program? What can I do more? Essentially, if your contract says I've only got 3 appearances and they're for 2 hours each, go stay for an extra 10 minutes or spend an extra 10 minutes on social media, just, kind of promoting that event or something like that, just to give them a little bit more bang for their buck, because ultimately they probably don't have to invest in your program at all to survive. But you're the one coming to them saying, look, I need your help and this is how I'm going to help you. Give them more of a reason to stay with you, because I've seen so many times, specifically through motocross and off-road racing, where sponsors are just completely taken for granted and they invest all this big money, and we're talking anywhere between $1,000 and $10 million. And at the end of the year, they're like, you know what? It wasn't worth it for us because the guy only did so much and we got only so much out of it. Not to really make sponsors sound like they're greedy, but I think that as an athlete or as a representation of that brand and somebody that really relies on them, go the extra mile. That's kind of all I'm saying. Do more than what you put in the contract, because it'll make yourself feel good. It'll make them feel good. And you know what? You'll probably go racing next year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I mentioned before how I nerd out on psychology books, and one of the things that I'm reading a book right now, the book is actually on creativity. And which, if you'd asked me 10 years ago if I'd read a book on creativity ever, I would have spit in your face and laughed. But this book is talking about complacency as just the thing that takes creative people down. I mean, you get into your domain, you become an expert, or you're on the top of your game, whatever it is. You start taking it easy. You don't. It's not conscious. It's not like people are thinking like, "Wow, I'm gonna start sucking," or like, "Wow, I'm really gonna just let this sponsorship deal slide." That's not the way it works. You legitimately, you think that you're doing enough, or you think, "Oh, well, I've gotten this far. I put in the hard work. Now I can back it down." It's that's complacency.
It's a never-ending thing, and just to touch on it, not too much more, but just a little bit. Jeff Gordon was a great example of somebody that really knew how to keep a sponsor happy. Although he didn't have a ton of sponsors in his life, obviously Exalta was the big one. But from what I've heard is he always showed up 5 minutes before an appearance and stayed 5 minutes late, even if it was, going to be detrimental to his weekend. He still did it because he cared and he was invested. I've seen, like I said, too many times where people just kind of, again, take it for granted. I don't want to harp on that term too much, but it's realistic. And then the other thing that I've really taken into account is, you might have had a crappy day on the racetrack or in the pits or whatever, but don't turn that into your sponsor's crappy day. Like, they all know it's racing. Racing is so unpredictable. There's so many elements. Anything can happen. But if you get taken out by the slowest guy in the racetrack and you get out of the car screaming your head off, throwing your helmet, and not paying any attention to them or the media, it just doesn't make anybody look good. So for me, we've had pretty good runs this year, but we've also had a few pretty bad runs. But I always make sure to, before I get out of the race car, put myself in check, make sure that I'm not going to be looking bad or saying something stupid, and then making sure that the sponsor feels special that they're there, even though, you had a terrible finish. So one of those ways is by doing fun and upbeat videos after every race. And again, whether they're publicly shared by the sponsor or just shared internally, it makes a difference. So that's kind of my speech from this podcast that I want to convey as much as possible.
Yeah, and that's good. And I'm sorry for everybody listening, but I have another thing to add onto this one. And it's kind of random that I'm thinking about this. But if you do, and this is a recommendation, right? You can give it a shot and see how it works. But if you do lose a race, which everybody does at some point, if things go bad, or maybe even if you do something embarrassing, there are some ways to turn that around to your advantage. Now, I'm going to give you a completely random example here, but Ryan Reynolds. So Ryan Reynolds he's a movie star. He's been in a bunch of stuff. He's Deadpool as well. That's probably what he's most popular for right now. But he did this movie Green Lantern, and which is a superhero movie, and it just bombed. And like, it could have been career ending, but he makes fun of it so openly about how poor it was. He even, like, it's built into the Deadpool script, which I think he had a pretty big hand in creating, where he legitimately makes fun of himself as Green Lantern in multiple movies. I'm like, man, that's so good, because he could become defensive or just try to like sweep it under the rug, but no, it was bad. Like, it was a bad movie.
Yeah.
But he has made so much good things come of that bad movie.
Yeah, and that shows me, one, it's confidence, and then two is able to take the humility. I mean, in motorsports in general, there are a lot of egotistical driven kind of people, and I think that that's something that's in some ways really good on the racetrack side, but off the racetrack, I don't think it's anything that really benefits people. So if you can kind of accept that humility and like you said, turn it into something funny or something that people can understand, as opposed to just being very standoffish or set in your ways, and that's the only way, I think that it'll just bring people in to embrace you even more. So yeah, like you said, I can relate because I've seen those movies, and it's hilarious. Like the way that he incorporates it, and it gets it off of people's mind, or at least gives them a reason to keep following, even though that movie was a total bust.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Well, what's the best way for people listening to connect with you?
Yeah, social media is probably the best, unless you catch me at a racetrack somewhere or on TV. But my Instagram handle is @WillRodgers_, and it's Rodgers with a D. Don't forget it. And then Facebook is Will Rodgers Racing, I believe, or it's just Will Rodgers now. We actually recently changed that. And then my Twitter is @WillRodgers65. So go over there, like it, follow it, comment, send me a message. We'll start a conversation.
Dude, I spelled your name wrong on the outline.
I know. I was gonna say something after the end of the podcast.
No kidding, man. That is.
Yeah.
You just said it right there, and I was like, I looked up. I was like, please let that D be in there. And like, nope, it's not there.
Nope. It's all good, man. Like, I get that 3 times a day. It's all good.
Yeah. You know, the D just doesn't add a lot of value to the whole word. You can kind of get it done without it, but you know, it's there. Just like my last name, like 99% of the population can't get my last name right, and you know what? I get it because it's messed
exactly.
Up, but,
it gives me some unique value, though. I mean, like, the only other guy that's popular with the D in his last name is Aaron Rodgers.
Right.
So
right.
I think, you know, from a unique standpoint, it's a good thing, as long as you can remember it. Because if you type it in wrong on Google, you will not find me. It's just not happening.
And you know what? You kind of just blew my mind there too. Aaron Rodgers has a D as well.
Yep.
Maybe there's like a certain percentage of the population that can't recognize somewhat silent letters, and I think that I would fall into that. Because that just blew my mind as well.
No harm done, man. It happens all the time.
All right, well, hey, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today, taking extra time to join us today, and also allowing me to spell your name wrong as part of our initial outline. But hey, I'm going to close things out. Have fun and ride safe. Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Sponsored Rider Club podcast, powered by AMSOIL. Again, make sure you subscribe. I don't want you to miss upcoming guests. We have Ross Robinson and Duncan Lee coming up next. Also, follow us on social media. You know where to find us on social media because there's only a few platforms that people actually use nowadays. So go check those out. Pay particular attention to our Facebook page. We do live episodes on there. You can go watch the video, ask us questions as we're doing it live. I am super excited about our next one. We have Evan Schendel coming on from Polaris. We just had Shelby Anderson on live, also representing Polaris. So big deal. Evan is on the marketing team, working on Polaris RZR marketing strategies. Like, this is the one that you want to listen to. So October 22nd at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. That's when we currently have it scheduled. Hopefully that date doesn't change, but man, this is going to be cool. I will ultimately end up releasing that as a standard podcast episode too. So if you can't hit the live one, don't worry, it's going to come out here. But like, why would you not want to listen to marketing strategies from Polaris themselves? To get some insider access to upcoming guests, go ahead and check out the Sponsored Rider Club on Facebook. I also announce guests on there, so it's a good spot to find out about it. A special thanks goes out to our sponsors, AMSOIL, Armor Coat, SolderWeld, Bold Racing, TopThePodium.com, Crash Addict Industries, and Racing Addix. I also want to shout out some of our other partners, GSP XTV Axles, MBRP Power Sports and MBRP Exhaust, HMK USA, Stud Boy Traction, and One Stop Performance. I look forward to serving you again next week. Until then, have fun and ride safe.